She told him to save himself, but the human refused to let go. She was broken, her voice weak, her words a desperate plea. "Save yourself," she begged. But the human only tightened his grip, his exoskeleton groaning under the weight. For 3 endless days across fire and ash he carried her, because humanity does not abandon hope, not ever, the crash and the promise. The mining station Epsilon 7 floated silently above the barren moon known as Scorched Haven, its rotating rings generating artificial gravity for the 1,000 souls who called it home. Marcus Chen wiped the grease from his hands as he finished his morning maintenance routine on the station's power cores. As chief engineer, he'd spent 5 years keeping this aging facility operational, and he knew every bolt, wire, and circuit by heart. "Chen, report to Docking Bay 3. The station commander's voice crackled through his communicator. "We have diplomatic visitors who need a technical briefing." Marcus sighed. Diplomatic visits meant putting on his cleanest coveralls and pretending the station wasn't held together by determination and creative engineering. He made his way through the maze of corridors, passing miners from a dozen different worlds. Humans worked alongside the crystalline vendors, the 4-armed Brax, and even a few of the enigmatic Zilani. The Zilani were new to the galactic community, having only made contact 3 years ago. Their world was rich in rare minerals, but they were cautious about trade agreements. Today's visit was supposed to change that. When Marcus entered the docking bay, he immediately noticed her. Among the group of officials stood a Zilani woman, whose silver skin seemed to shimmer under the harsh industrial lights. Her large violet eyes surveyed the station with intelligence and curiosity. Unlike her escorts who wore elaborate robes, she dressed in a practical flight suit that emphasized her tall, slender frame. "Ah, Chen," Commander Torres called out. "This is Ambassador Lyra of the Zilani Collective. She specifically requested to understand our mining operations from a technical perspective." Lyra stepped forward, extending her hand in the human custom. Her fingers were longer than a human's with an extra joint, but her grip was firm. "Engineer Chen, I've read your proposals for sustainable mining practices. Your ideas about preserving ecosystem balance while extracting resources are refreshing." Marcus was surprised. Most diplomats glazed over when he talked about environmental protection in mining operations. "Thank you, Ambassador. Would you like to see our recycling systems first? We've achieved 92% efficiency in material recovery." For the next 2 hours, Marcus guided Lyra through the station's technical marvels. She asked intelligent questions, understood complex engineering concepts, and even suggested improvements to their water reclamation process. Her 2 guards seemed bored, but Lyra was fascinated by everything. They were in the station's observation deck, discussing the challenges of mining in low-gravity environments. When the first explosion shook the station, the lights flickered and died, replaced immediately by the red glow of emergency power. Alarms shrieked through the corridors. Marcus grabbed Lyra's arm as the station lurched violently to one side. "Raiders!" Commander Torres's voice boomed over the intercom. "All hands to battle stations. This is not a drill." Through the observation window, Marcus saw 3 black ships firing on the station's defensive turrets. Raiders were common in the outer systems, but they'd never been bold enough to attack a station this size. "We need to get you to safety," Marcus told Lyra, but she shook her head. "They're after me," she said quietly. "The peace treaty I carry. If the raiders get it, they can forge documents, create conflicts between our peoples." Another explosion, closer this time. The observation deck's windows cracked in a spiderweb pattern. Marcus made a quick decision. "Emergency pods Deck C, can you run?" They sprinted through corridors filled with smoke and panicking personnel. Lyra's guards tried to keep up but were separated when a section of ceiling collapsed. Marcus pulled Lyra through a maintenance shaft using his knowledge of the station to avoid the worst damage. The pod bay was chaos. People fighting for the remaining escape pods, pushing and shoving in desperation. Marcus spotted one pod in the far corner, partially hidden behind loading equipment. He guided Lyra toward it, using his body to shield her from the crowd. "Wait," Lyra said as they reached the pod. "My guards, no time," Marcus replied as another explosion rocked the station. This one was massive, probably the main reactor. "The station's coming apart." He pushed her into the pod and squeezed in after her. The space was cramped, designed for one person, maybe 2 small ones. Marcus's fingers flew over the launch controls. The pod's engines fired, shooting them out into space just as Epsilon 7's superstructure began to buckle. Through the small viewport, they watched the station break apart in a slow, terrible dance of destruction. The raider ships were moving through the debris, searching. One spotted their pod and opened fire. Marcus threw the pod into a wild spin, diving toward Scorched Haven's atmosphere. The moon had earned its name, a desert world with temperatures that could kill an unprotected human in minutes during the day and freeze them solid at night. But it was their only chance. The pod shook violently as they entered the atmosphere. Warning lights flashed across the console. The heat shields were failing, damaged by the raiders' weapons fire. Marcus fought the controls, trying to maintain some kind of controlled descent. But it was hopeless. "Brace for impact," he shouted over the screaming alarms. The last thing he remembered was Lyra's hand gripping his arm, her violet eyes wide with fear, and then the world exploded into darkness and pain. Marcus woke to the taste of blood and sand. The pod was half buried in a dune, its hull cracked open like an egg. Every part of his body hurt, but he could move. That was something. "Lyra?" he called out, his voice hoarse. A weak moan came from deeper in the wreckage. He found her pinned under a twisted piece of the pod's frame, her silver skin now marked with dark purple bruises. Blood? Her blood was purple, he noted distantly, seeped from a deep gash in her side. "Can't. Feel my legs," she whispered. Marcus carefully extracted her from the wreckage. She cried out in pain, but he had no choice. The pod was leaking fuel and the sun was rising. Soon the temperature would become lethal. He carried her to the shade of a rocky outcrop and examined her injuries. The gash was deep but clean. Her legs weren't broken, but something was wrong with her spine. Zilani anatomy was different from humans, but trauma was trauma. "You need to leave me," Lyra said, her voice weak but determined. "The outpost is 3 days from here. You can make it alone." Marcus looked across the vast expanse of desert. The emergency beacon in the pod was destroyed. Their water supplies were limited. She was right, alone he might survive. Carrying her would slow him down, use more water, more energy. "No," he said simply. He returned to the pod, ignoring Lyra's protests. In the emergency supplies, he found basic medical supplies, 4 liters of water and emergency rations for 2 days. Not enough. But in the cargo section, partially damaged but still functional, was something that might save them both. It was an old mining exoskeleton, one he'd been repairing as a side project. The power cells were only half charged, but the frame was intact. It would give him the strength to carry her and protect them from the worst of the heat. Marcus spent an hour in the rising heat, his fingers working with practiced efficiency to get the exoskeleton operational. It was bulky, designed for moving heavy equipment, not precision work, but it would do. When he returned to Lyra, now wearing the exoskeleton, she stared at him in disbelief. "You can't be serious. The power won't last 3 days. "Then I'll carry you without it when it fails," Marcus said, carefully lifting her. The exoskeleton's servos whined softly as they adjusted to her weight. "I'm not leaving you." "Why?" she asked, her violet eyes searching his face. "You barely know me." Marcus adjusted his grip, making sure she was secure. "Because that's what humans do. We're stubborn. We don't leave people behind. And because—" He paused, then gave her a slight smile. "You're the first diplomat I've met who actually understood my water recycling system." Despite her pain, Lyra managed a weak laugh. "You're insane." "Probably," Marcus agreed and began walking into the desert. The journey through hell. The first day was a test of endurance that pushed Marcus to his limits. The twin suns of the system turned Scorched Haven into a furnace, the air shimmering with heat waves that made the horizon dance like a mirage. The exoskeleton's cooling system worked overtime, but Marcus could still feel sweat pooling in places he didn't know could sweat. Lyra drifted in and out of consciousness, her body fighting the trauma and blood loss. Marcus had done his best with the medical supplies, using biofoam to seal the worst wounds and giving her pain suppressors that worked on most humanoid species. He hoped they would work on Zilani physiology too. By midday, they had covered maybe 10 kilometers. The exoskeleton's power reading showed 60% remaining. At this rate, it would die before the second day ended. Marcus pushed the worry aside and focused on putting one foot in front of the other. The landscape was desolate beauty. Rust-colored sand dunes giving way to plains of crystallized salt that reflected the sunlight like broken mirrors. In the distance, mountain peaks rose like teeth against the pale yellow sky. The outpost was beyond those mountains, according to the emergency map in his head. "Marcus," Lyra whispered, more lucid than she'd been in hours. "You need to rest." "I'm fine," he lied, his voice rough from the dry air. "Your vital signs are displayed on the exoskeleton's HUD," she said weakly. "I can see them from here. Your heart rate is dangerously high." He found a cluster of rocks that provided minimal shade and carefully set her down. The water supply was already down by a third. He gave her a small sip, then took an even smaller one himself. "Tell me about your world," Marcus said, trying to distract her from the pain as he checked her wounds. "What's it like?" Lyra's eyes focused on something far away. "Green. So much green it would hurt your eyes. Trees that sing in the wind. Oceans that glow at night with bioluminescent plankton. My daughter would have loved to see it. Would have? She died in the first contact war before the peace talks began." Lyra's voice was steady, but Marcus saw the pain that had nothing to do with her injuries. "That's why I volunteered for this mission. To make sure no other mother, human or Zelani, loses a child to meaningless conflict." Marcus was quiet for a moment, then said, "My brother was on the Serenity when it was destroyed. Military engineer. He was building schools on a colony world when the extremists attacked." They sat in shared silence, two people who understood loss, brought together by circumstances neither would have chosen. A sound made Marcus tense, a rhythmic hissing like steam escaping from a pipe. He turned to see shapes moving across the salt flats. Sand serpents, each one 3 meters long, their crystalline scales reflecting the sunlight in prismatic patterns. Beautiful and absolutely lethal. "Don't move," Lyra breathed. "They hunt by vibration." Marcus remained perfectly still, his arms still around Lyra from when he'd set her down. The serpents glided past, their bodies undulating in hypnotic patterns. One came close enough that Marcus could see its multifaceted eyes, each one tracking different movement. For 5 agonizing minutes, they remained frozen. Finally, the pack moved on, disappearing into the heat haze. Marcus let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. "We need to keep moving," he said. "They might circle back." As the day wore on, Lyra told him about the treaty she carried. Not a physical document, but information encoded in a biological storage device implanted in her body. It contained the terms for mining rights, technology exchanges, and most importantly, mutual defense agreements that would protect both species from raiders and extremists. "If I die, it dies with me," she explained. "The encoding is tied to my biological signature." "Then you're not dying," Marcus said firmly. Night fell with shocking swiftness on Scorched Haven. The temperature plummeted from lethal heat to dangerous cold in less than an hour. Marcus's breath formed clouds in the air as he carried Lyra toward a formation of crystal caves he'd spotted before. Sunset. The caves were formed from some kind of mineral that held heat during the day and released it slowly at night. The temperature inside was almost comfortable. Marcus set Lyra down gently and collapsed beside her, every muscle screaming in protest. 40% power remaining, he read from the display, trying to keep the worry from his voice. Lyra reached out, her long fingers touching his face. "You're burning yourself out for me." "Worth it," he said, too exhausted to elaborate. She studied him with those remarkable violet eyes. "Humans are insane. You know that, right? Any sensible species would have left me. Good thing we're not sensible." Marcus pulled out their meager rations, dividing them carefully. "We're the species that looked at space and said, let's strap ourselves to controlled explosions and see what's out there." Lyra laughed, then winced as it pulled at her injuries. "My people spent 1,000 years debating whether to venture beyond our atmosphere. You humans did it within decades of achieving flight. We're impatient," Marcus admitted. "It's a flaw and a strength." As they ate, Lyra told him about Zelani culture, their art that incorporated living plants, their music that could only be heard properly with their extended hearing range. Marcus talked about Earth, about cities that floated on the oceans and the great terraforming projects on Mars. "If we survive this," Lyra said softly, "I want to see Earth." "When we survive this," Marcus corrected. "And I'll give you the grand tour. Pizza in New York, cherry blossoms in Tokyo, the Aurora Borealis in Norway. Is pizza really as good as humans claim?" "Better," Marcus said with absolute conviction. Despite the exhaustion, despite the pain, they talked through half the night. Two people from different worlds finding common ground in humor, loss, and hope. When Lyra finally fell asleep, Marcus stayed awake, watching the entrance to the cave and planning the next day's route. The second day dawned with a sandstorm on the horizon. Marcus woke Lyra gently, helped her drink some water, and prepared to face the desert again. The exoskeleton's power was at 35%. There's another option, Lyra said as he lifted her. The treaty information can be extracted after death. If you leave me and take my body— stop, Marcus interrupted. We're both getting out of this alive. End of discussion. The storm hit them 2 hours into their journey. Sand driven by 100-kilometer winds scoured any exposed skin. The exoskeleton's joints began to clog with grit. Marcus wrapped Lyra in his emergency blanket and hunched over her, using his body and the exoskeleton's bulk to shield her from the worst of it. He couldn't see more than a meter ahead. The navigation system was useless. He picked a direction based on instinct and kept walking. The exoskeleton's power dropped faster as it fought against the wind resistance. 30%. 25. 20. When the storm finally passed, they were at the base of the mountain range. Marcus's exposed skin was raw and bleeding from sand abrasion. Lyra was unconscious again, her breathing shallow. The medical scanner showed her vital signs weakening. The path through the mountains was treacherous, a narrow trail carved by long dead rivers, lined with rocks sharp enough to shred the exoskeleton's joint seals. Marcus picked his way carefully, aware that one fall could kill them both. By late afternoon, they reached the highest point of the pass. In the distance, barely visible, was a cluster of lights. The outpost. Still a day's journey, maybe more. The exoskeleton died as the second sun set. The power cells gave a final whine and the frame locked up, becoming dead weight. Marcus hit the emergency release, stepping out of the bulky frame. Without it, Lyra felt heavier, but not impossibly so. He lifted her in his arms, feeling his merely human muscles protest. "Leave me," Lyra whispered, coming awake. "You can make it to the outpost and bring back help. By the time I got back, you'd be dead," Marcus said bluntly. "So we do this together." "I'm dying anyway," she said, her voice barely audible. "The medical scanner shows organ failure. My species. We don't handle trauma well." Marcus looked down at her, this brave woman who had faced death with such dignity. "Then I'll carry you until you don't need carrying anymore. But I won't leave you to die alone." Tears, purple like her blood, rolled down Lyra's cheeks. "Why do you care so much?" Marcus adjusted his grip and started walking. "Because in all the universe, with all its vastness and indifference, the only thing that matters is that we choose to care. We choose to help each other. We choose to not give up. That's what makes us human, and from what I've seen, it's what makes you Zilani, too." The final stand, the third day, began with Marcus's body on the verge of complete collapse. He had carried Lyra through the night, stopping only when his legs literally gave out, resting for minutes before forcing himself to continue. His water was gone. The last of the rations had been given to Lyra, trying to keep her alive just a little longer. The outpost was visible now, maybe 10 kilometers away, across a final stretch of rocky badlands. So close, yet it might as well have been on another planet. Marcus's vision was blurring. His muscles cramped with every step. Lyra hadn't spoken in hours, though he could still feel her shallow breathing against his chest. That's when he heard the engines. 3 skimmers appeared on the horizon behind them, kicking up dust clouds as they approached. The same black configuration as the raider ships that had attacked the station. They'd been tracked. Marcus looked around desperately. There was nowhere to hide on the flat expanse. No cover, no weapons, nothing but rocks and determination. He gently set Lyra down behind the largest boulder he could find and picked up 2 fist-sized stones. "Really going to fight them with rocks?" Lyra whispered, somehow finding the strength for humor even now. "David beat Goliath with a rock," Marcus replied. Though he knew how this would end, the skimmers circled them like predators, then landed 20 meters away. 6 raiders emerged, a mix of species, all armed, all wearing the cobbled-together armor typical of pirates. Their leader was human, which somehow made it worse. A scarred face with dead eyes that had seen too much violence and learned to enjoy it. Well, the leader said, his voice rough. "The ambassador and her pet engineer. You've led us quite a chase." "She's dying," Marcus said, stepping forward to put himself between the raiders and Lyra. "The treaty information dies with her." "You've already lost," the leader laughed. "Oh, we know about the biological encryption, but Zilani biology is fascinating. The information persists for about 6 hours after death, if the body is kept at the right temperature. Plenty of time to extract what we need. He raised his weapon. Step aside, engineer. You've done something impressive here, but it's over. Marcus didn't move. No. The leader seemed genuinely amused. You're exhausted, dehydrated, unarmed. What exactly do you think you can do? Marcus picked up a larger rock, hefting it. Whatever I have to, the other raiders laughed. One of them, a brack with 4 arms, each holding a weapon, stepped forward. Let me handle this, boss. Haven't had a good fight in weeks. The brack approached casually, confident. Marcus waited until he was close, then moved. Not with the speed of the exoskeleton or superhuman strength, but with the desperate fury of a man with nothing left to lose. He dodged the first shot by millimeters, brought the rock down on one of the brack's wrists with a crunch of breaking bone, grabbed the dropped weapon and fired. The brack went down. Marcus rolled behind another rock as the other raiders opened fire, plasma bolts turning sand to glass around him. He checked the weapon. 3 shots left. Impressive, the leader called out. But you're just delaying the inevitable. Marcus knew he was right. But every second he delayed was another second Lyra lived. Another second for a miracle. He popped up, fired, dropped another raider, then had to dive as return fire nearly took his head off. 2 shots left. 4 raiders. Marcus, Lyra called weakly. The implant. I can trigger a feedback loop. Destroy the information. But it will— Don't you dare, Marcus shouted back, understanding immediately. It would kill her instantly. He stood again, fired, missed as exhaustion made his hands shake. 1 shot left. The raiders were advancing now, spreading out to flank him. Marcus gripped the weapon, calculating. He couldn't win. But maybe he could take the leader with him. Create enough chaos for— A shadow fell across the battlefield. Marcus looked up to see a ship descending. Not a raider vessel, but a sleek military craft bearing the insignia of the Galactic Peace Force. Doors opened before it even landed, and armored soldiers poured out. Drop your weapons, a amplified voice commanded. You are surrounded. The raiders hesitated, then their leader snarled and turned his weapon toward Lyra. Marcus didn't think. He just moved, throwing himself forward. The plasma bolt meant for Lyra hit him in the shoulder, spinning him around. He hit the ground hard, darkness creeping in from the edges of his vision. Through the haze he heard weapons fire, shouts, then silence. Someone was lifting him, saying something about medical treatment. But he fought them, reaching for Lyra. Together, he mumbled. We go together. Marcus woke in a medical bay, clean white walls and the hum of proper equipment. His shoulder was wrapped in healing gel, IVs feeding fluids into his dehydrated body. He tried to sit up and a gentle hand pushed him back down. Rest, a familiar voice said. He turned his head to see Lyra in the bed next to his, looking weak but definitely alive. Her violet eyes were bright with tears. You stupid, stubborn human, she said. You're alive, Marcus breathed, relief flooding through him. Thanks to you. The Peace Force was monitoring raider communications. When they heard the pirates talking about the ambassador, they came. 5 more minutes and— She trailed off. 5 more minutes and I would have beaten them with rocks, Marcus said, managing a weak smile. Commander Torres appeared in the doorway, his arm in a sling but otherwise intact. Hell of a thing you did, Chen. Carrying the ambassador across that desert. The Peace Force wants to give you a medal. Don't care about medals, Marcus said, his eyes never leaving Lyra. Is the treaty safe? Delivered and signed, Torres confirmed. The Zelani Collective was so impressed by your actions they've added additional provisions, including a clause about human stubbornness being classified as a strategic asset. Lyra laughed, then winced. That was my suggestion. Torres left them alone and Marcus reached out, taking Lyra's hand. Her long fingers intertwined with his. What happens now? He asked. Now I heal. The treaty creates a new partnership between our peoples, and I've requested a permanent position as liaison to the human sectors. She squeezed his hand. I still want to try that pizza you mentioned. It's a date, Marcus said. Though I should warn you, after this a normal dinner might seem boring. After this, Lyra said. Normal sounds perfect. 2 months later, Marcus stood in the observation deck of the newly rebuilt Epsilon 7, watching ships from a dozen worlds coming and going. His shoulder still ached sometimes, reminding him of those 3 days in the desert. Lyra stood beside him, fully recovered, wearing the formal robes of a Zelani ambassador. The raiders who survived are facing trial, she told him. The leader claims he was just following orders that someone higher up wanted the treaty stopped. There's always someone higher up, Marcus said. But they failed. That's what matters, Lyra turned to him. You know what the hardest part of my report was? Explaining why a human would carry someone he barely knew across a desert for 3 days. My government couldn't understand it. What did you tell them? The truth. That humans are capable of extraordinary things when they choose to be. That your species' greatest strength isn't your technology or your numbers, but your willingness to help others, even at great cost to yourselves. Marcus shrugged, embarrassed. Anyone would have done the same. No, Lyra said firmly. They wouldn't have. That's what makes it remarkable. A chime sounded and Marcus checked his communicator. My shift in engineering starts soon. And I have a trade negotiation in an hour, Lyra said. Then quieter. Dinner after? Pizza? Pizza. As they walked toward the lift together, Lyra added, My daughter would have liked you. She always said the universe needed more people who did the right thing just because it was right. Marcus stopped, touched by the comment. I think I would have liked her too. They stood there for a moment, two survivors who had found something unexpected in each other. Not just friendship, not just respect, but a connection forged in the crucible of survival and choice. Thank you, Lyra said simply, for not leaving me. Thank you, Marcus replied, for being worth carrying. The station continued its rotation, ships came and went, and life went on. But in the records of both human and Zilani history, the story would be told of a human engineer who refused to abandon an alien ambassador, who carried her for 3 days across a desert that should have killed them both, using nothing but an old exoskeleton and sheer determination. It would become a legend, told in different ways on different worlds. But at its core, it would always be the same. A reminder that in a universe vast and often cruel, the choice to help each other, to not give up, to refuse to leave anyone behind was what made people truly human, and perhaps what made all sentient beings truly alive. The weight of legacy, the celebration in New Geneva Colony should have been joyful. 6 months had passed since the treaty signing, and the Human-Zilani alliance was flourishing. Trade routes opened, technology exchanged, and both species prospered. But Marcus Chen stood at the edge of the gathering, watching diplomats mingle, feeling oddly disconnected from it all. His shoulder ached. It always did during weather changes, even on climate-controlled colonies. The medic said it was phantom pain from nerve damage, a permanent reminder of that plasma bolt meant for Lyra. He absently rubbed it through his dress uniform, a garment he still felt uncomfortable wearing despite the numerous ceremonies. You're brooding again. Lyra's voice came from behind him. She moved silently, a trait of her species that still sometimes startled him. I'm observing, Marcus corrected, though his smile betrayed him. She stood beside him, close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her silver skin. The Zilani ran hotter than humans, something he'd grown to appreciate during cold nights. The ambassador from Earth's military council wants to meet you. Another medal ceremony, I suspect. I have enough medals to plate a shuttle, Marcus muttered. What I need is to get back to real work. Lyra studied him with those violet eyes that seemed to see through everything. You miss it. The engineering, the problems to solve that don't involve politics, and is it that obvious? Only to someone who knows you. She touched his arm gently. There's something else. A message came through diplomatic channels. The raiders who attacked us, their leader wants to speak with you. Marcus tensed. Why? He says he has information about who ordered the attack. He'll only share it with the human who carried the Zilani ambassador across Scorched Haven. The prison transport redemption's path was a converted military vessel, all harsh angles and reinforced bulkheads. Marcus had to pass through 7 security checkpoints before reaching the visitor's chamber. The raider leader, Jonas Crenshaw, his file said, sat behind a force field looking smaller than Marcus remembered. Prison had not been kind to him. The scarred face was gaunter, the dead eyes now holding something Marcus hadn't expected. Regret. You came, Crenshaw said simply. You have information, Marcus replied, not bothering with pleasantries. Crenshaw laughed bitterly. Straight to business. I respect that, he leaned forward. Do you know what the treaty really means? Not the trade routes and technology exchanges, but the real implications? Enlighten me. It breaks the monopolies, For 50 years, 3 mega corporations have controlled all mineral extraction in the outer systems. They decided who got resources at what price, who prospered and who starved. The Zilani Agreement creates alternatives, competition, freedom. Marcus remained silent, waiting. GenCorp, Stellar Dynamics, and the Riva Syndicate. Crenshaw continued. They paid me to stop that treaty. Gave me coordinates, access codes, even the schedule for the ambassador's visit. It was supposed to be simple. Grab the ambassador, extract the data, kill everyone who knew about it. But you failed. Because of you. Crenshaw's expression was unreadable. One stubborn engineer with an old exoskeleton ruined a plan years in the making. Do you understand what you've done? These corporations don't forgive. They don't forget. You and the ambassador have targets on your backs for the rest of your lives. Marcus felt a chill despite the room's warmth. Why tell me this? Because I have a daughter, Crenshaw said quietly. Had. She died in a mining accident on a GenCorp facility 5 years ago. Faulty equipment they knew about but didn't replace because it would cut into profits. I took their money for revenge, told myself I was hitting back at the system. But all I did was try to perpetuate it. He stood, moving closer to the force field. They'll come for you again. Both of you. The treaty is signed, but if its main architects die in an accident, fear will prevent others from following your path. Watch your backs, engineer. Trust no one in the corporate sectors. As Marcus left the prison, his mind raced. He immediately sent an encrypted message to Lyra, then changed his transport route 3 times before heading to their agreed-upon safe location, a small observatory on New Geneva's moon. Lyra was already there when he arrived. Along with someone unexpected, Commander Torres and a Zilani he didn't recognize, elderly with skin more blue than silver. This is Elder Ven, Lyra introduced, my mentor and the architect of our people's expansion policy. The elder studied Marcus with eyes that held centuries of wisdom. So this is the human who defied probability itself. 3 days across Scorched Haven, the mathematical models suggest you should have died 17 different ways. I'm stubborn, Marcus said, his standard response to such observations. You're more than that, Elder Ven replied. You've become a symbol. Do you know how many rescue missions have succeeded since your story spread? 30% increase in survival rates because people push a little harder, carry a little longer, refuse to give up a little more strongly. Torres cleared his throat, which brings us to why we're here. The threat Crenshaw described as real. Intelligence confirms unusual activity around GenCorp and the others. They're planning something. Let them come, Marcus said firmly. It's not that simple, Lyra interjected. They won't attack directly. It will be sabotage, accidents, economic pressure. They'll try to break the alliance through fear and doubt. Elder Ven moved to the observatory's window, looking out at the stars. There is another way. We make you untouchable, not through guards or weapons, but through purpose. He turned back to them. We're establishing a new program. Joint Human-Zilani Rescue Operations. Elite teams trained to respond to disasters, accidents, attacks. Teams that embody the spirit of what you two represent, and we want you to lead the training program. Marcus blinked. I'm an engineer, not a soldier. Exactly, Torres said. You think differently. You solved problems on Scorched Haven that military training wouldn't have prepared you for. We don't need soldiers. We need people who understand that saving lives sometimes requires unconventional solutions. Lyra took Marcus's hand. We'd be working together, training others to do what we did, but with proper equipment and support. Marcus thought about Crenshaw's warning, about the corporations lurking in the shadows. Then he thought about those 3 days in the desert, about choosing to care when it would have been easier not to. When do we start? He asked. The training facility was built into an asteroid, providing varied gravitational conditions and environmental challenges. The first class of recruits arrived 3 weeks later, 12 humans and 12 Zilani, all volunteers who had distinguished themselves in various fields. Marcus stood before them, still uncomfortable with public speaking, but knowing it was necessary. You're here because someone thought you had potential. Forget that. Potential means nothing if you can't translate it into action when lives are on the line. One recruit, a young human woman named Sarah, raised her hand. Sir, is it true you carried Ambassador Lyra for 3 days without stopping? I stopped plenty, Marcus corrected. I fell down, I doubted, I wanted to quit more times than I can count. But I got back up. That's the only difference between a hero and a corpse. Heroes get back up one more time, then they fall down. Lyra took over, her natural diplomatic skills making her the better teacher. This program isn't about creating super soldiers. It's about understanding that every life has value, that cooperation between species makes us all stronger, and that sometimes the greatest strength is admitting you need help. The training was brutal. Marcus designed scenarios based on real disasters: station decompression, ship crashes, colony plagues. He pushed the recruits to their limits, then showed them how to push past those limits through teamwork and innovation. But it wasn't just physical training. Lyra insisted on cultural exchange, language lessons, and psychological preparation. "You can't save someone if you can't understand them," she said repeatedly. 6 weeks into the program, the first real test came. A mining station in the outer reach sent a distress signal. Explosion, multiple casualties, failing life support. It wasn't a drill. Marcus and Lyra led the fastest recruits in a rapid response. The scene was chaos: twisted metal, vacuum exposure, and 37 miners trapped in a collapsing section. The recruits wanted to rush in, but Marcus held them back. "Think," he commanded. "What killed more people on Scorched Haven? The crash or poor decisions after?" Sarah, the recruit who'd asked about the desert crossing, studied the wreckage. "The structure's unstable. If we go in force, we'll trigger a complete collapse." "So?" Marcus prompted. "We stabilize first," she said, understanding dawning. Teams of 2, 1 human, 1 Zilani. Humans handled the heavy lifting with exoskeletons. Zilani used their better flexibility to navigate tight spaces. It worked. All 37 miners were extracted alive. The recruits were exhausted but exhilarated. They'd saved lives not through brute force but through cooperation and intelligence. That night, as Marcus and Lyra reviewed the mission, she said quietly, "The corporations haven't made their move." "They will," Marcus replied. "But every life we save, every successful mission makes it harder for them to paint us as threats. We're building something they can't buy or destroy: hope." 3 months later, the attack finally came, but not as expected. No bombs or assassins. Instead, a coordinated media campaign questioning the program's cost, spreading rumors about preferential treatment for certain species, and highlighting every minor failure while ignoring successes. GenCorp's CEO, a woman named Victoria Reeves, appeared on multiple news feeds. "We're not against cooperation," she said smoothly. "But this program diverts resources from proven methods. How many could be saved if that funding went to traditional emergency services?" Marcus wanted to respond with anger, but Lyra held him back. "Don't engage on their terms. Show, don't tell." The response came a week later when a GenCorp mining facility suffered a catastrophic failure. Equipment they'd delayed replacing finally gave out, trapping 100 workers. Traditional emergency services said it would take 3 days to reach them safely. The workers had 12 hours of air. Marcus and Lyra's team arrived in 6 hours. Using techniques developed in training, combining human engineering with Zilani biological knowledge to create temporary atmospheric processors, they rescued every single worker. The media tried to spin it, but the workers themselves went public. One, a grizzled miner named Thompson, stood before cameras still covered in rock dust. "GenCorp left us to die. The human Zilani rescue team saved us. That's all that matters." Public opinion shifted decisively. The program expanded, with colonies competing to host training facilities. Marcus found himself managing a movement he'd never intended to create. But success brought new challenges. Some recruits came for glory rather than service. Others couldn't handle the psychological toll of constant life or death decisions. And the corporations, while publicly supportive now, continued their shadow operations. One night, Marcus found himself back in the observatory where it all started, looking at the stars. His shoulder ached as always, but now it was joined by a dozen other small pains, reminders of rescues, of lives saved and nearly lost. Lyra joined him, as he knew she would. "Regrets?" she asked. "Never," he replied immediately. "You?" "I regret that it took almost dying for our species to truly see each other." She leaned against him. "But I'm grateful for the path that led us here. Even the 3 days of me carrying you through hell." "Especially that," she said, "because it proves something important, that in the darkest moments when everything logical says to give up, some people choose to carry others forward anyway. And that choice, that stubborn refusal to leave anyone behind, might be the most important trait any species can have. Marcus pulled her close, thinking about all the recruits learning that lesson, all the lives that would be saved because two people from different worlds refused to give up on each other in a desert. Ready for tomorrow's training scenario? Lyra asked. What fresh hell have you designed for them? Asteroid collision with a colony ship, complicated by a radiation leak and first contact with a previously unknown species. Marcus whistled. That's evil. That's realistic, Lyra corrected. The universe doesn't care about our comfort levels. The echo of Hero's 5 years had passed since Marcus. Chen first carried Lyra across Scorched Haven. 5 years since that journey sparked a revolution in interspecies cooperation. The program they'd started now operated across 17 systems, with over 3,000 trained rescue specialists. But Marcus knew that success had made them complacent. He stood in the memorial hall of the main training facility, now relocated to a massive space station called Unity Point. The walls bore the names of those who died in rescue operations, 43 names from 8 different species. Each one hurt, but each one also represented dozens, sometimes hundreds of lives saved. The new recruits are ready for evaluation. Sarah's voice interrupted his thoughts. She'd become his second in command, her natural leadership emerging through countless missions. Though I'm not sure they're prepared for what you've planned. Marcus turned from the memorial wall. They never are. That's the point. The evaluation scenario was Marcus's most complex yet, a cascading failure exercise where solving one problem created 2 more. It was designed to break teams, to force them past their limits, to teach them that sometimes there were no good choices, only necessary ones. But as the recruits filed into the briefing room, alarms began blaring throughout Unity Point. Not the training alarm, the real one. Emergency broadcast from the Kelvor system, the station's AI announced. Planetary disaster in progress. Marcus and Sarah rushed to the command center where Lyra was already pulling up data streams. Her face was grave. It's Kelvor Prime. The planet's main fusion reactor has gone critical. If it blows, it'll take half the continent with it. 15 million people in the blast radius. How long? Marcus asked. 6 hours, maybe less. Marcus did the math. Kelvor was at the edge of their operational range. They could get there in 5 hours if they pushed the engines past safe limits. That would leave them an hour to prevent catastrophe or evacuate 15 million people. An impossibility. Sir? Sarah said quietly. The recruit. Marcus looked at the eager faces of the new class, then at the veterans already suiting up. A desperate plan formed in his mind. We take everyone, he declared. Veterans, recruits, support staff. Every ship, every piece of equipment. We can't evacuate 15 million, but maybe we can stop the reactor. Torres, visiting for the evaluation, stepped forward. Marcus, taking untested recruits into that, is exactly what someone did for me once, Marcus interrupted. I was just a cargo engineer when I carried Lyra. Sometimes you become what the situation demands. Within 30 minutes, 16 ships launched from Unity Point. Marcus commanded the lead vessel with Lyra and the veteran teams. Sarah took the recruits in the support ships. The journey was tense, with engineers pushing the engines while medics prepared for mass casualties. During transit, they received more information. The reactor's cooling system had been sabotaged. Corporate terrorism from a group opposing Kelvor's new environmental regulations. The planet's own rescue services were overwhelmed, and their nuclear engineers had already died trying to reach the reactor core. It's suicide, one of the veterans, Alani said. The radiation levels alone are survivable for approximately 40 minutes with our best suits, Lyra finished. We'll need to work in rotating teams. Marcus pulled up the reactor schematics. It was an old design, one he'd actually studied years ago when working on station power systems. There's a manual override in the subchamber. If we can reach it and input the shutdown sequence, we can prevent the meltdown. The subchamber that's currently flooded with radioactive coolant? Sarah asked over comms. That's the one. They arrived at Kelvor Prime to find chaos. The capital city was in full evacuation mode, but the highways were gridlocked. Panic had set in. Local authorities had given up on stopping the meltdown and were focusing on saving who they could. Marcus divided his forces. Veterans would attempt to reach the reactor. Recruits would assist with evacuation. Everyone knew it wasn't enough, but they had to try. The reactor complex was a nightmare of twisted metal and radiation warnings. Marcus led the first team in, their suits immediately registering dangerous exposure levels. They had minutes, not hours. The path to the subchamber was blocked by debris from an earlier explosion. Marcus began calculating alternatives when one of the recruits, a young Zelani named Kairos, spoke over comms. "Sir, I have an idea." "You're supposed to be with evacuation," Marcus said. "I was, but—" Kairos transmitted a schematic. "I studied this reactor type. There's a maintenance shaft that connects to the old cooling system. It's not on the main plans because it was added during a retrofit. My parent worked on the construction." Marcus examined the route. It was narrow, filled with century-old pipes that might collapse at any moment, but it led directly to the subchamber. "It's too dangerous for a recruit," Lyra said. "With respect, Ambassador," Kairos replied. "I'm the only one small enough to fit through some of those passages, and I know the retrofit specs by heart." Marcus made a command decision. "Kairos, you guide us. Sarah, continue evacuation. Everyone else, we're going through the maintenance shaft." The journey through the shaft was claustrophobic hell. Pipes groaned under thermal stress. Radiation readings climbed steadily. Marcus watched his team's suit integrity dropping with each meter they advanced. Halfway through, a pipe burst, flooding the shaft with superheated steam. 2 team members were badly burned despite their suits. Marcus ordered them back, their protests overruled by medical necessity. They reached the subchamber access with 15 minutes left before critical mass. The room beyond was exactly as feared, flooded with glowing coolant that would eat through their suits in minutes. "I'll go," Marcus said, checking his suit one last time. "Your shoulder," Lyra said quietly. "The old injury. Your suit's weak at that joint. The coolant will breach there first." She was right. The plasma wound from 5 years ago had left scar tissue that prevented a perfect suit seal. He'd hidden it from medical reviews, but Lyra knew him too well. "Then we find another way," Marcus said. "No," Kairos interrupted. "We create a bridge. Link suits share life support systems. The person in front takes the radiation damage. Those behind provide clean air and power. We can extend survival time by pooling resources." It was brilliant and horrifying. The person in front would die, but the others might survive long enough to input the shutdown codes. "I'll lead," Marcus said immediately. "No," 3 voices said simultaneously. "Lyra." Sarah over comms, and surprisingly Kairos. "You know the shutdown codes," Kairos said simply. "You have to input them. I'll create the path." Before anyone could stop him, the young Zelani dove into the coolant. His suit immediately began deteriorating, but he pushed forward, clearing debris, marking the path. Marcus and the others followed, their suits linked, sharing what protection they could. They reached the manual override with Kairos' suit at 5% integrity. The young Zelani was unconscious, his body shutting down from radiation exposure. Marcus passed him back to the others while his fingers flew over the console, inputting codes he'd memorized a lifetime ago. The shutdown sequence initiated with 30 seconds to spare. As the reactor powered down, Marcus turned to find Lyra supporting Kairos, her suit's medical systems working desperately to keep him alive. They retreated through the maintenance shaft, racing against time as their suits failed one by one. They emerged to find Sarah had commandeered every medical transport on the planet. Kairos was rushed into intensive care, his body ravaged but alive. The other team members were treated for various degrees of radiation exposure. Marcus himself required immediate treatment, his shoulder, as Lyra had predicted, showing severe radiation burns where the suit had failed. But they'd done it. 15 million people saved. The aftermath was complicated. Kairos survived but would require months of treatment. Several team members faced long recoveries. The corporate terrorists were arrested. Their connections to the same companies that had opposed the treaty years ago finally exposed. Marcus stood in Kairos' hospital room a week later, watching the young Zelani sleep. Lyra entered quietly carrying a datapad. "The review board wants to give him a medal," she said. "Youngest recipient of the Galactic Valor Award." "He earned it," Marcus said. "Kid saved 15 million lives." "He had a good teacher," Lyra replied, taking Marcus's hand. "Someone who showed him that being a hero isn't about being fearless. It's about being afraid and acting anyway." Marcus's shoulder ached. It always would now, the radiation damage adding to the old plasma burn. But watching Kairos breathe steadily, knowing that 15 million people were alive because a team chose to risk everything, the pain seemed insignificant. The corporations are backing off, Lyra continued. This incident exposed their connections to terrorism. Public opinion has turned completely against them. The rescue program is being expanded again with full governmental support from 12 systems. It won't last, Marcus said realistically. There will always be those who profit from others' suffering. Then we'll always be needed, Lyra replied simply. Sarah appeared in the doorway. Sir, ma'am, you should see this. She led them to a common area where a newsfeed was playing. It showed scenes from Kelvor Prime, not of the near disaster, but of the evacuation. Humans and Zalani working together. Recruits barely out of training coordinating massive crowd movements, veterans risking their lives to save strangers. But what struck Marcus most was interview after interview with survivors, all saying variations of the same thing: they didn't leave us behind. It's become a rallying cry, Sarah explained. Not just for the rescue services, but for the entire cooperative movement. No one gets left behind. They're calling it the Chandlira Doctrine. Marcus shook his head. We didn't create that idea. No, Lyra agreed, but you embodied it. That day on Scorched Haven, you showed that choosing to help someone, even at great personal cost, can change everything. Later that night, Marcus found himself back where he often went when he needed to think, standing before the memorial wall. 43 names had become 43 stories he knew by heart, each one a reminder of the cost of their work. But now he also thought of the lives saved. Thousands directly, millions indirectly. The ripple effects of that one decision in a crashed pod on a desert moon, choosing to carry instead of abandon, had spread across the galaxy. Lyra found him there, as she always did. The recruits are asking about the next training scenario. Let them rest first, Marcus said. They've earned it. And you? She asked. When do you rest? Marcus considered the question. His body bore the scars of dozens of rescues now. He was tired in ways that sleep couldn't fix. But then he thought of Kairos, barely older than a child, diving into radioactive coolant because it was necessary. He thought of Sarah, who'd grown from an uncertain recruit to a leader who could coordinate planetary evacuations. He thought of all the future recruits who would learn that sometimes. The most important thing you could do was refuse to give up on someone. When everyone gets home safe, he finally answered. Lyra smiled, understanding that meant never. Then I guess I'll keep carrying you when you need it, just as you carried me. Together? Marcus asked, echoing words from long ago. Always together, Lyra confirmed. As they walked back to their quarters, Marcus's shoulder ached with its familiar pain, but he realized something had changed. The pain was no longer just a reminder of sacrifice, it had become a reminder of purpose. Every ache, every scar was proof that he'd chosen to help, chosen to carry, chosen to not leave anyone behind. The program would continue. New recruits would come, facing scenarios designed to break them and rebuild them stronger. Some would fail, some would die, but most would go on to save lives in ways they never imagined possible. And it all started with a cargo engineer who refused to leave an alien ambassador in a desert, choosing to carry her for 3 days through hell because it was the right thing to do. The universe was vast, often cruel, and utterly indifferent to suffering. But within it, people could choose to care, choose to help, choose to carry each other through the darkness. That choice, Marcus knew, made all the difference. The memorial wall would grow. More names would be added. But for every name inscribed, hundreds more would live because someone refused to leave them behind. It wasn't a perfect system, wasn't a complete solution to the universe's dangers, but it was enough. It was a start. It was proof that even in the darkest moments when logic said to give up, some people would choose to carry others forward, and sometimes that stubborn refusal to abandon hope was the most powerful force in the universe.